John's an engineer, which is why he was chosen to come to the bunker with his family. So he's able to build things, he's able to fix things, and that's been his job in this community, keeping a lot of those things going in the bunker. He also has taken it upon himself, which is a bit of a sacrifice, basically, because whenever you go out into the elements, even if you have a suit on, you're still getting pummeled with radiation. You're still getting a leakage of pollution into your lungs. But he goes out and he scavenges and he finds things that will help them back down in the bunker, that, to fix things. So whether it's, a spanner or, a pipe or whatever he can get, because there's debris spread everywhere, or from ships that roll in, literally from the disaster. So that's been his job up until now as we come into this movie. Roman is actually a goat when it comes to movies. One, he's a fantastic young actor. He's worked a bit, and his mother is a director. His father is a DP. So he spent a lot. He spent a lot of time on film sets. So, and he's very, very talented, and he's a great kid. And he seemed to have a lot of the characteristics that fit well into a young Nathan, this curiosity, this courage, and this fire, but also this reflection that I think Nathan so often has. And just a watcher. He's seeing, he's learning, he's taking things in through osmosis. But once he was there, I loved this kid. I had such fun working with him, and it didn't take him long, I think, to feel comfortable with me and Morena and feel that he was safe, but also to learn that this is a different kind of movie, and a lot of this movie is about stamina and commitment and really diving into these scenes and bringing it. I guess that's why we have a movie, because we chose a family that did have great resilience and knew how important hope was, that despite the impossible odds at times, that fight for each other, that are there for each other. But I think, and by the way, and that's one of the things I love about this movie, is that message of hope. And no matter how bad things might seem, to just sometimes you just got to hold on. And I think that's part of what it was with them too, because at times it felt like maybe they had lost hope, or that hope was such a small glimmer. But sometimes it's just about hanging on, just about having a bit of faith that you will get through this, or that somehow, some way, things will brighten up, that there is some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. Is just don't die. Just don't give up, John is not an expert or something. He's not a superhero, but he's a guy who has limitations, as do they. He's a guy who has blemishes, as do they. He's a guy who doesn't always get things right, that they can that is reacting to the situation sometimes with as much fear as they are, or with as little of an idea of how to deal with the situation. And that's something that you can really relate to and identify with. So it's a different kind of story, a different kind of audience participation, I think, where they really feel like, I feel like John Garrity, Allison, John, and Nathan, the family, they really are the audience in this movie. They're not just watching them, but they're in there with them because they are so relatable. Sometimes you just got to dive in there and give it everything. And then at the end of the day, you crawl into bed, and then the next morning you get up and you start it all again. That is in a very crude way. How you make is not just action movies, but survival movies. Because survival movies as well, you're always at the edge, especially when you're an everyman. You know, so you got to put yourself not just in the scene itself, but before the scene starts, put yourself into that level of beaten upness, of exhaustion, of pain, and that's as exhausting as the acting itself is the preparation for the 220 takes that you do in a day, where you're very ill and you know you've been shot, you've fallen off some, you're exhausted, you're coming down off of the adrenaline of a tsunami, you know, something like that, or an earthquake, buildings falling on top of you, and then it's we have, I think, over the years learned what we do well together, and then where he ventures off and where I venture off, and how we can complement each other in that. And not just the creativity of the performance, but even in the balancing each other on set and between shots. You know, when I know Rick's going to be there for me in a certain way, and when I know how to go over and, you know, make him feel better about whatever's going on. So there's I yeah, 4 movies is a long time, and they were 4 difficult movies. So we've been through a lot together, Rick and I, and he's a, you know, he's a fantastic director, and yeah, I'm very proud of the movies we've made. I had such a phenomenal experience working with her. Just even becoming friends because we spent so much time together in between watching the world fall apart, waiting for the next meteor shower. We would obviously learn a lot about each other, and we laughed so much. When we came to the second movie, we were well aware of what we were in for. And I go back to that, knowing the physicality, the emotionality of what lay ahead, that there was going to be a lot of running, screaming, crying, hugging, you know, and just to kind of get ready for that. But she's such a team player. She's a phenomenal actress. She has great stamina in terms of being able to get through these movies. I love shooting on location because typically when you're on location, there's a reason for it. It's normally, especially in a movie like this, because it's an interesting location. If you're shooting a post-apocalyptic film, then you're not gonna go into your normal park, you know, or to your normal cafe and sit and do a scene. So therefore, we went to some really interesting countryside and old decrepit Air Force bases in England that were just cinematically and visually, I thought, pretty stunning. Um, and obviously, when you're on location, then it just allows everything to feel more real. You sit into something in a more truthful way. You react without the artifice that you might have to create yourself in your imagination when you're on green screen. And you have to deal with the elements. You have to deal with the messiness. Like, for instance, in Iceland, in the final scene, where, you know, when we're running up and down over, there were so many holes in that ground. It's pretty treacherous and exhausting. But that's how it should be. That's life. That is locations. I think in terms of themes, in terms of you know, the idea about that we're stronger in numbers, we're stronger as a team, and the more that we stick together in these times, like if we look at the world now as we're coming out of COVID, which maybe in some ways this represents people coming out of COVID in a world that is way more tricky than it was a few years ago, with a lot more going on that we have to kind of shuffle through and fight through. That just the idea of that hope, hanging on to hope, being able to just to be able to cling on and to not deal with things in isolation, to come together as much as we can. And as John and Allison did in the first movie, seeing past, their squabbles, all their issues with each other, that they realized in terms of the larger meaning of this world meant nothing. I hope that it has, that's part of its legacy, and also perhaps in realizing that, this world is maybe more vulnerable than we think it is, and that we have to take care of it. This is perhaps an insight into a view of another reality that we're lucky not to have had yet, and we're still, have to put a lot of work in to make sure we avoid.